What's up, everybody? Today we are going to talk about zero-calorie food. That's right, zero-calorie food. Pros, cons, and best use cases. So if you are dieting right now and or are heading into the new year with some dieting goals, stick around for this episode. And if you're interested in anything else that is bodybuilding, fitness, and or psychology related, hit subscribe, hit like, and let's get to the episode. So first of all, what zero-calorie foods am I talking about? Things like those shirataki noodles, any of the dressings that are labeled as 0 calories, your 0-calorie gums, your fillers, your xanthan gums, anything like that. Now, while many of these are marketed as 0 calories, a lot of them are considered 0 calories because they have trace calories and or enough fiber to sort of offset the calories that they do have. For example, like a full bottle of some of that 0-calorie dressing. I forget what kinds there are out there. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. If you were to have maybe half the bottle or the whole bottle, it might be 20 or 30 calories, not necessarily zero. What are some pros of these 0-calorie foods? So the high fiber variety, like the shirataki noodles, they are going to add some volume to your food without significantly increasing calories, and that's going to help with satiety overall. So adding some of those noodles to, let's say, a salad or some cabbage, along with whatever meat you're having, might give you a good sort of boost in terms of how full you're going to feel. Additionally, these things, another pro, they're going to add to your diet flexibility. Calorie-free dressings and syrups are going to let you enjoy some of the flavors that you don't normally get while you're dieting, staying within a calorie goal, and just overall making dieting more sustainable. For example, eating something like 0-calorie ranch, yuck. I would not do that. Eating that with veggies might make the veggies go down a bit easier. So it's going to make your diet a bit more flexible if you are if taste is important to you and you're just getting tired of what it is you're eating. So they absolutely help with hunger management. They absolutely help with diet flexibility. And then when you consider something like your 0-calorie gums with like xylitol, you even have the added benefit of just like good dental hygiene. So they can be very helpful. What are the cons of 0-calorie foods? Well, if it's zero, that means there must be no downside. There are a couple. So number one, trace calories are going to add up. If you spend a majority of your diet trying to incorporate these 0-calorie foods, multiple bags of those shirataki noodles, bottles of the dressing, a bottle of a dressing a day, all of those calories are going to add up and they're going to work against your overall goal of being in a calorie deficit. Now, those calories might not seem a lot, especially when the bottle says zero. However, if you eat enough servings, those calories are going to add up and possibly pull you out of a deficit. Number two downside, you may have some digestive sensitivities. Like there have been times when I've had enough of those noodles or xanthan gum or just regular chewing gum on top of diet soda that my stomach, although I wasn't hungry, it felt distended and it was noticeably just uncomfortable. Now, for some people, they'd rather have that uncomfortable feeling as opposed to the hungry feeling. However, I'd say you are approaching something that is not going to be healthy for your long-term goals. Lastly, there's the psychological trap of an over-reliance on needing to feel full while you're dieting. Look, at a certain point, you are just going to have to make room for, expand around, and understand that you're going to be hungry in a diet. Now, these sort of 0-calorie foods can help sort of kick that can down the road, but eventually, if you want to get lean enough, like stage lean, like possibly glute lean, or at least gluten ham tie-in lean, you are going to be hungry in your diet. And so the desire to avoid the feelings of hunger more often than not is going to lead to an over-reliance on these diet foods. And we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want? Do we want to rely on these foods, or is there another way to go about it? Here are some best practices for using our 0-calorie foods. Number one, balance flavor and nutrition. So I always like to pair my 0-calorie foods. If I'm using those noodles or something like that, I like to pair that absolutely with a meat, absolutely with a veggie, and I only like to do that for a meal or two a day. And I will generally split those noodles in half and use it in one meal and use it in another. I'm not going to try and use multiple bags throughout the day. That can absolutely help. And, honestly, some people might be able to get away with that, but I like to limit myself. One of my core values is temperance or moderation in all things, and moderation in these types of foods will help keep us from developing sort of an over-reliance on them. So try and take a balanced approach. If you're having multiple meals a day, perhaps having a serving or two of these zero-calorie foods will be a good balance for you. You'll have to figure it out for yourself. Number 2, in your off-season, you are going to want to practice mindful eating. You are also going to want to practice feeling hungry and knowing what that feels like. So let's start with mindful eating. So mindful eating is going to be using all of your senses when you are eating food, slowing down, sitting at the table as opposed to standing. And I don't know if you're like a gremlin or me, eating over a sink at some point. You are going to want to clear your space. You're going to want to get away from your phone, and you're going to want to practice engaging with all your senses while you are eating the meal. You're going to want to pay attention to the textures, the flavors, various things like that. I've got a whole other video on mindful eating. Check that out. So that's step number 1. Number 2, practice being hungry. What do I mean by practice being hungry? Pay attention during your off season, when you're not in a calorie deficit, to when you feel hungry. Notice it. Sit. Take a few deep breaths. Breathe into the hunger. See what that really feels like. And then, if you're in a surplus, when you're in a surplus, pause in the middle of your meal and notice how hungry you feel there. Pause 25% in your meal. Pause 75% of the way through your meal and begin sort of exploring and experimenting with the feeling of hunger and satiety. This is going to help you in the long run whenever you are dieting or engaging in some kind of a calorie deficit, because it can be hard to sort of be mindful and engage with our foods in that way because we are so hungry. If you begin practicing in the off season, you can then implement while you're in contest prep or while you're dieting pretty strictly. Last thing, I practice a particular kind of therapy. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. We have this thing called the hexaflex, various aspects to it, but one big aspect is making room for our emotions and certain physical sensations that we're not going to be able to get away from. So I would say practicing acceptance around the sort of physiological sensation of hunger is going to be a big thing. If you are dieting, if you're doing any type of calorie restriction, eventually it's not going to feel good and it's going to feel uncomfortable. So taking a step back, saying, this is how this should feel. Not forever, not for super extended periods of times, but for our set parameters is going to be a healthy way of coping with those feelings. Breathing into those sensations, this is the way it should feel. Having little mantras like that can go a long way to make room for things that are uncomfortable. And I think that's part of the reason we're all drawn to sort of fitness and bodybuilding. We don't mind being a little uncomfortable. We don't mind being a little uncomfortable in the gym, lifting weights, doing things like that. We just need to make sure that that also transfers over to, eating. Now, this isn't just whenever we are dieting, but also for some people, it can get really uncomfortable to eat lots of food. That is another way in which we can start making room for discomfort or things like that, because that sort of comes along with the sport, both ends of the spectrum. Last real thing here, calorie deficits still really do matter. So whenever you're eating these zero-calorie foods, whenever you're chewing your packs of zero-calorie gum, whenever you're having all of your diet sodas to a lesser degree than the zero-calorie foods with actual sort of density to them, your calorie deficit's going to matter. These zero-calorie foods aren't going to burn fat. They're not going to guarantee weight loss. They're a tool to support your overall diet strategy, not a shortcut. So the next time you decide to diet and you want to engage with these zero-calorie foods, absolutely use them, but use them sparingly, and then begin working on these sort of tertiary skills to help you deal and manage hunger in the long term. Mindful eating, practicing feeling and making room for hunger in the off season. These are the skills that are going to help you sustain your dieting practices in the long run. Alrighty, folks, that is it for today's episode. Please, down in the comments, share with me your favorite dieting hacks. I would love to do an episode on those and dive into some of the psychological implications. If you like this episode, you can shoot me a like, but I'd rather have you shoot me an email, ask me a question. Would love to respond, and I will talk to you all in the next episode for another mental skill review or something else. Have a happy holidays.